Hi, we're back. 8.5. We're going to talk about the Russian front. We've got a little tiny bit of review before we get into that, but just sort of some fun facts, if you will. This is the biggest military event of all time. And back in first semester, I said there were three things we could always count on when it came to Russia. One, it's huge. Two, it's freezing. And three, it's full of Russians. All totaled up, there will be roughly 30 million dead. This is an approximate number, but it includes military numbers, it includes civilians, and it includes the extermination camps that Hitler would have created. But today we're going to talk about the military aspect. Excuse me. This really is sort of the battle royale between Hitler and Stalin. There, of course, are many similarities. We've looked at some of those. We looked at the propaganda. But these two guys absolutely hate each other. They are on opposite ends of the political spectrum. And you can't be the most powerful guy if there's someone else out there claiming he is also the most powerful guy. This is entirely Germany versus the Soviet Union. There aren't any other countries involved in this event. So what brought us to this? How did we get to this point? There's the 1939 Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. That was in August of 1939, where Molotov, representing the Soviet Union, Ribbentrop, representing Germany, they agree to split Poland half and half. So Germany will get the western half, Soviet Union will get the eastern half, and they will split it. This is largely in part because in 1939, Stalin's not ready to fight a war against Hitler. Hitler has been building his army in many sort of diverting ways like those Hitler Youth, but Stalin needs more time to prepare. Another reason why this happens is our concept of Lebensraum, the living space. Hitler wanted to take land that had not been German before, but land where the unwanted people from in Germany could be shipped. Where can we move these unwanted people, such as the Jews? We'll move them to a new location, we'll put them to work, and Germany will be for the Germans. So Hitler perceived or believed that the Soviet Union had a lot of this land. We've got the political element, fascism versus communism. We know that Hitler and the Nazis don't like communists. If we go back to 1933 and the Reichstag, the communists were blamed. This is also the ethnic element. The Germans believe that they are the superior race, the Aryans, and other groups like the Slavs are Untermensch, subhuman or less than. Russians are part of the Slavic ethnic group. Stalin's 5-year plans that he first created in the late 20s and early 1930s were about getting Russia updated technologically. He puts in place more of these 5-year plans, not just for the economic reasons, but now to get on track militarily so that he can compete with Germany. So this first part is called Operation Barbarossa. This is Hitler's battle plan to invade the Soviet Union. Barbarossa was a medieval Germanic king, Redbeard, Barbarossa, and so he has named this battle after that great German leader. When Stalin and Hitler had their agreement back in 1939, everyone knew that it was kind of weird. People knew that these two didn't get along, and it was probably just a matter of time until things changed. If you take a look at this cartoon, in the distance, you can see some oil derricks. The Soviet Union, with its vast territory, has lots of resources, and oil is one of them, and a resource that is absolutely essential in this war. One of the first things the Germans are going to do is disrupt communication lines, like telephone lines and telegraph wires, to make it as difficult as possible for the Russians to coordinate their actions. We can see from this map that the Germans leave Germany, Poland rather, in June of 1941, and they are going to want to use blitzkrieg tactics to cover territory quickly and efficiently as possible. Once again, just like we saw with the Blitz, Hitler disagrees with the leadership of the military. Hitler is obsessed with speed and capture Moscow. It's the capital city, and so we've got to get there as fast as possible. The army recommends a slower, more measured pace because supply lines. Soldiers might be able to move quickly, but if they don't have the supplies to keep up with them, those soldiers are going to go hungry. But Hitler's in charge, so speed is essential. They actually give speed or methamphetamines to these tank drivers so that they can stay awake longer. It takes a while to get this massive force across territory to get to Moscow. We get into fall, say October, and we all know just by looking at a map and from our understanding of the weather that when it gets to fall in the Soviet Union, it starts getting cold. These Panzer division, these tank divisions, are trying to make it across, but they are outrunning their supply line. This is also difficult because the Soviets are using scorched earth tactics. They are destroying resources along the way, which is forcing the Germans further into Russia. Does this sound familiar to you? Then we get to winter. So it's, November 1941 into December 1941. The German tank divisions make it to 30 miles outside of Moscow, but it is so cold that the fuel actually freezes in the tanks. At that point, they are stuck. So they don't make it to Moscow, which means they have failed. Who does this sound like? Napoleon. This brilliant mind who is so obsessed that they don't listen to logic or reasons. So now Hitler is going to have to find a different plan of attack. He has failed at taking Moscow, so now he's going to look somewhere else. Why did he fail? Because he wasn't prepared. The Russians are prepared. They know what's going to happen with the weather. They have weapons that are specifically designed to function in these extreme low temperatures. They have guns that work better. They also just that sort of Russian mindset that they can rebuild if they have to. They'll destroy their own territory as long as the enemy doesn't get it. So now Hitler will have to come up with a new target. He's going to look to the south. So let's take a look at a map. Here you see with the yellow star, that's Moscow. The Germans don't quite make it. They're very, very close. Now Hitler is going to look to the south, the city of Stalingrad. It is a relatively new industrial city named after Stalin, and so in many ways it is a symbol of Stalin's power, which is partly what Hitler is attacking. The Germans go back, they sort of regroup, and they start again in August of 1942. Look at the calendar, they should know better. As I just mentioned, this is an industrial city, very important to the war effort. At this point, though, I'd like you to pause and watch the video on 20th century battlefields. When you finish that, come back. Hopefully you watched the video. If you haven't watched it yet, then you're not being honest. Part of this industrial city is also important because of the oil field. Stalin is able to sort of figure out what Hitler's plans were. It makes sense that Hitler's next target would be Stalingrad. So Stalin prepares. We saw in the video clip that the civilians are used to prepare the city. Unfortunately, Hitler's ego gets the best of him. He divides his forces. He sends some to the oil fields, some to Stalingrad, as we've seen time and time again. Forcing to split troops makes you weaker. In preparation of the invasion, the Luftwaffe starts bombing the city. This is often called softening up the enemy. Just like in World War I, the artillery would fire before the troops went over the top. And as that video just mentioned, civilians are forced to stay in the city and often sort of wrapped into the military forces. This is because, well, one of the best resources that the Russians have are Russians, and it's their city. They are more likely to defend it with all of their might. At this point, pause the video, watch the clip on going into the Battle of Stalingrad from the movie Enemy at the Gates. We saw in that clip that the Russians, even if they have industrialized, they are still low on resources. One gun for one man, another guy takes the bullets, picks up the gun after he finishes. So Luftwaffe is bombing the city. They are getting closer into the city. You see in this map, they are in the black. But the Soviets, very wisely, stay very, very close to the Germans. The reasons the Soviets are doing that, if the Germans are going to attack the Soviet front lines, there's a very good chance they might also hit the Germans. As the Germans get closer to the city of Stalingrad, the Russians can surround them, which you can see in that image. They are almost forcing the Germans into the city, and this is exactly what they want. The Russians want it to be an urban street-by-street battle. Germans are so obsessed with we must take the city, they're not necessarily thinking clearly. So this becomes an urban battle. The people of Stalingrad, they know the city better, and they can wait out winter. Hitler is so obsessed, his ego once again takes over, and he decides he is going to continue fighting until the last man and the last bullet. And that's pretty much what happens. You can see from this picture, why haven't these bodies been buried? Because it's frozen. The ground is frozen solid. Germans run out of supplies because they were surrounded. They've been trapped in. They're outnumbered because Russians have way more Russians. This is a hugely significant battle, not just because of the numbers. Let me just double check the numbers here. So Germany ends up with 850,000 killed, missing, or wounded. Again, 850,000 for Germany. For the Soviet Union, 1.1 million killed, missing, or wounded in terms of military numbers, and an additional 40,000 civilians killed. So the Russians experience much heavier losses, but proportionally, it's not as damaging as it is for the Germans. It's like we saw with Verdun in the First World War. Both lose a lot, but for the Germans, this is a tremendous defeat. They have not accomplished what they wanted to. Hitler actually declares a national day of mourning. He's really sort of embarrassed by this. But the most significant element is because of this, because Stalin and the Soviets so damaged the German war effort, Stalin will use this later on to argue for why he should essentially get control of Eastern Europe, that he deserves a tremendous amount of thanks for his efforts in ultimately defeating Hitler. Last thing, I want you to watch one more video. It is the Horrible Histories video.